4 years, y'all. 4 years, okay? 4 years running. The most watched films on streaming were all led by women of color. Encanto, Turning Red, Moana, and this year's K-pop Demon Hunters. Three Young Women, Secret Demon Hunters, K-pop girl group, the #1 streaming film of the year. So you would think that these things must have made a whole lot of money, and you would think that Hollywood was like, okay, let's make more of these. But our guests today are here to tell us that there's actually a different story. Even when these projects are making lots of money, even critical accolades, there's still this different story. Welcome back to Sista Brunch. My name is Fanchon Cox. I am the co-creator and host of the Sista Brunch podcast. This is the show all about Black women and Black gender expansive people who are thriving in film, TV, media, all the things. And we are so lucky to have these guests today because on June 17th, we'll usually like to keep these kind of evergreen, but we had to get them in as quickly as possible after this really important study that one of them has been working on these for a very long time. So on June 17th, UCLA dropped its latest Hollywood Diversity Report. This is the one the whole industry is waiting for. It is more than a decade of data on who gets to lead, who gets to direct, who gets to write, and importantly, who is actually watching. So today we have the amazing people behind this report. So first of all, I'll start with Dr. Ana-Christina Ramón. She runs UCLA's Entertainment and Media Research Initiative. She's the lead author of the report that we'll be talking about today. She's been studying equity in this industry for more than 20 years. When Hollywood would rather not hear these numbers, she is there facing them and then sharing them publicly so we all understand where things are. And joining her is Jade Abston, soon to be Dr. Jade Abston. Jade is a co-author on the report and a PhD candidate at UCLA. Jade's own research is on Black women in media, specifically what we get to build in music videos and visual albums. So when the traditional gates are not opening for us, Jade is saying that there actually is a good way for us to get in there. So here's how today's going to go. We're going to start off talking a little bit about context, making sure that we really understand the history of this report and why it happens. Then we're going to go to Jade and really hear about her dissertation and this opportunity that a lot of Black women are missing out on, and we want you all to know about it. And then we'll go to this year's report and just hear some top line data that should push you into action, sisters and siblings, to help make change in the industry. Welcome, Dr. Ramón and Jade Abston. Welcome to Sista Brunch.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. All right. So, Ana-Christina, we would love to begin with you giving us kind of the history of the report. What drove you to do it in the first place? What even drove you to be in this Hollywood world and then eventually start this report?
Well, as a social psychologist, race, ethnicity, and gender have always been my main area of focus. And so the issues that I have studied throughout have really focused also into equity and access for people of color, and especially for women of color, since, I am a woman of color. And so I think that just really looking at applied research and finding ways that it can be useful in real life and not just something that's in the ivory tower has always been of interest to me. So when the opportunity came up to really look into Hollywood, I was very much excited by this idea of being able to come up with research that could be used by everyone from Hollywood executives to the creatives themselves. And so Dr. Darnell Hun and I started to look into this research back in 2010 when we were meeting with a lot of Black writers back then and hearing their stories about the issues that were going on in Hollywood and the difficulties that they were experiencing. And so we really wanted to find a way to do this comprehensive analysis of representation in Hollywood, but we wanted to make sure that it was going to be used by the executives, in the industry. So we met with several executives, and one of them told us that it wouldn't be something that would be of interest to the higher ups in his industry if we did not connect it to the bottom line. And so we thought that was like a challenge that we, wanted to accept, and we wanted to figure out the best way to do a standardized analysis. Because previous research in the past hadn't really been able to compare across different studios because different researchers or racial and ethnic advocacy organizations were demanding some data from the studios. And demanding change, but the studios, the way that they complied was to give data that made them look good and in the best light. So we wanted to figure out a way to gather the data without including the studios and networks at all in terms of that data collection. So what we did was we looked out for independent, reliable sources, and that's where we started building this knowledge base of looking at different sources that would be available to look at the demographics of who was working in these key positions in film and television.
Let's talk about that real quick. What are the key positions that you look at, and why did you choose to look at those roles?
Yeah, so it was, very much like every position obviously is important and deserves analysis. But when we first started out, we really wanted to find out who were the creatives that were really the ones that were driving like the content that you saw in film and television. And we wanted to start there with the hopes that later we could find other ways to get more information. But because of the fact that, again, we didn't reach out to the studios and networks in terms of them providing any data for us, we when we looked at the credits that were available, we knew that we could definitely identify those positions of director, writer, lead, and then main cast roles. And then and for television, we wanted to look at show creators. So not showrunners, which aren't necessarily, credited the same throughout. But we wanted to look at like who was given the green light when they went to pitch to the network or studio their idea for this TV show. And so that's where we started out. And so since when we came out, those positions have stayed the same in terms of show creators for television. Then we did have writers and directors for television, and then obviously like the actors that I mentioned earlier. But then for film, we also wanted to look at screenwriters and the film directors and the same acting roles. And so we have done analysis in the past of key executives in the studios, but that's a little bit more difficult to get that data. But it's definitely those are the positions that we have focused in on, but not to say that any other position is not as important. But that was really kind of like the beginning of our longitudinal analysis.
The ones that really drive the kind of the hiring and drive the stories frequently.
Yes.
Let's also talk about how much the industry has changed since you started doing this, and therefore you had to make some updates in terms of how you looked at the data and what kinds of projects. So how many of these reports do you do annually now, and why?
Yeah, so when we first came out with our report, it was in 2014, but it took us a few years to get to that point, right? Because there was so much data and we didn't have enough people to really kind of gather all the data that we needed. And it was, just trying to make sure that we had our model correctly done. And so when we first came out with it, it included film from 2011 and 2012, and then we included the television year of that included broadcast cable and a little bit of streaming, but we didn't focus in on that until later. But that was from 2011 2012 traditional TV season, and so you can imagine that was like a ton of data. And so as the years have gone on, we decided that we needed to split it up because that would make sure that we were also reporting as quickly as possible, particularly for film, because of the fact that when we were doing the traditional television report, it was so much data that it took us so long to come out with it that our film data seemed like it was old already. And so now when we come out with our theatrical film report, it's really like the fastest turnaround I think that anybody ever has it in, because the amount of data that we have really comes out in just like 2.5 months after the year has completed. And so we split it up into the theatrical film report, the streaming film report, and then our TV report. And so the TV report has kind of evolved as well, because now we look at the top streaming shows. But when we talk about top streaming, we're looking at the metric that now is being used, which is minutes viewed. But then we provide also the ratings analysis, because that I think shows most of the enthusiasm for a show and how many people are actually watching the show. And what we do that nobody else does is that we include library titles and current titles, and we compare them to each other and across. So then that's another kind of different type of television report than we've had in the past. And so we've already had two of those. But yeah, there's just so much data. We could always go back to our traditional television report, but the reason why we actually switched it is because of the fact that then the following season that we were going to have to do a traditional television season was going to be a season of the fewest amount of television shows on broadcast, because it was following the strike, the year of the strike. And so we thought that it was going to be difficult to compare in a longitudinal analysis, because of the limited number of cases. And so then we decided to talk about streaming, because at that moment, Suits was like the most watched show, and that was being discussed for in 2024. They were talking about 2023 with Suits being the most viewed show on obviously it was on Netflix at the time. Right. And so we wanted to really do a deep dive as to, is the story that Hollywood's trying to sell that like only like these older shows are the ones that everyone is watching, or is there more to it? And so that's where we really looked into it further.
So, and we'll once we go back to this year's report, we can kind of look. I'd love to talk a little more about, for example, one of your report is one of the only ones that really talk about BIPOC, like that we are really kind of putting this group of the global majority together, which I love. And also some demographics that have changed throughout the years. But I want to get to Jade, so I'll just ask you this last question, kind of top line. What's the trend that you see through this whole time? What is the thing that it just won't budge?
Yeah. So it was interesting in terms of like what, all the changes we've seen. And obviously, and so again, also this research, I definitely want to make sure that I mention that Dr. Darnell Hunt and I founded this research and at UCLA. And so when we first started it was interesting that we first started to do this with the data back from 2011, and then that's where where it was like this slow like progression because there was a little bit of a change, but we caught it at one of those valleys when we first started it. And so that slow progression for film took about like 7 years from that point where we first started to like 2018, 2019, and to see that there was this increase in diversity. For TV, it was like right away up and down, like where it was not diverse hardly at all. And then again, it was like slowly, increasing. But then every couple of seasons, it would kind of change a little bit more. And so, so it was a little bit, and so, yeah, I mean, that's probably simplifying a lot of it, but for film, there was like, you could tell a little bit of a change, right? So that there was some attempt, but it was really to diversify the supporting roles. And that's where you can see, right? A lot of that change was infused at that level and not necessarily in the leads. And so,
I'm willing to bet that the early data that the studios gave you when that's what it was kind of maybe PAs for the crew position and
right,
maybe
exactly.
kind of
I'm sure, yeah, that
right.
data from the end of
It made them look good. That they wanted to.
Yeah, a lot of those reports were that's why it was so hard to standardize it. So when we first started doing this, then we could really see like, what's really going on. And then there wasn't that, as much diversity. And then slowly it progressed in terms of the supporting roles. And again, it was like maybe 1 year was really good for BIPOC directors, but then it was like the following year was horrible. And then obviously for women directors, it's, been difficult throughout. And so the one thing that was interesting is that a lot of the box office success that we were really pointing to happened around that time of 2018, 19. And then the pandemic happened, and then again it was like as if everything was wiped, back to start all over again. And then things slowly again progressed a little bit better. In 2023 was actually a better year for diversity in film, but then 2024 went completely back. It plummeted back down. And so it's almost like a very quick like back and forth in film that like it wasn't necessarily the case before. So like the metaphor we used for like the last report was like I was like a rocking horse, right? So it's like there's a lot of movement, but you're not going anywhere. And so then for television, it's been obviously another struggle, and so that was like a big part of it. Hi, this is Dr. Ana-Christina, and you are watching Sista Brunch.
Thank you for that context, kind of understanding why the need for this, and also why you chose to look at the kind of the performance and who's in these and look at those together. But Jade, I want to ask you about, so you're a co-author of this report, and you are also in the meantime, because clearly you don't sleep. So in the meantime, you are writing your dissertation.
Yes.
On Black women in media. So how is the report, what you're doing for the report, kind of feeding into this at all? And then also you chose music videos and visual albums. So all to say, yes. Tell us.
It definitely inspired the work coming in. I had a completely different idea of what I was going to be doing for my dissertation, and it kind of really evolved. I think when I first started, 2021 or 22, I don't even know at this point. It's been like 4 or 5 years. But it was a bit depressing. I think the first report that I worked on, and I'm just like, these numbers are really low. And so it really sparked my interest to look in places where I hadn't looked before or was thinking about looking in terms of what Black women were creating in terms of media. And I had really good lessons of looking in the past, of thinking about women like Kathleen Collins, who directed Losing Ground, thinking about Cheryl Dunye with Watermelon Woman, and I think all this really great work that's happened, and also even thinking about just influences this long lineage of Black women within Black filmmaking practices, and where else could I look? And I grew up watching music videos. That was just like something fun to do, like with my sisters, and and I love music, so I figured, kind of combining these two things and turning towards that, and looking at how these women are really, they're using experimental audiovisual strategies. They're experimenting with a lot of technology that, a lot of people may not have the opportunity to within traditional like filmmaking. And so I'm really just, interested in seeing, the knowledge production that is kind of coming out of this. And most of my work is rooted in Black feminism, so I'm kind of looking at it from that angle. But I think there's a lot there within these other spaces. Even within traditional art spaces, there are a lot of artists like a Colleen Smith, who, she's an interdisciplinary artist that dabbles in like video installations and so there's so many places to look. And so the report definitely inspired me to kind of like see what else is out there. Not that it's not important, because it is very important that we see, the change happen there. But I wanted to be able to present something to other people to show that, there's still work that is being done,
Yes.
Specifically by Black women, and being able to share and to look at that. So my case studies, looking at Grace Jones is kind of like the figure of where this kind of starts at. And
she's watching over you.
And like Missy Elliott and Tierra Whack and Solange, who's also, kind of combining the art space within her work. So I'm looking at, all these really great women that are, really innovating and have been for a long time. And so that's pretty.
We can't wait to read it. I feel like I'm not kidding you. When I was thinking about doing this conversation with you two, I was like, we need to read her dissertation for an episode of Sista Brunch.
Yeah.
So right, we could add some music to it. Obviously
definitely be sharing it.
Okay, we're holding you. All right, we're holding you to that. I love the connection here too, because I know the kind of the framing of this report this time. In any given moment, we have these two options: step forward into growth or step back into safety. And so you, I think, Jade, are looking at how do you said it too. Looking at these numbers can be depressing. Like truly, it feels, if you're somebody who works in the industry, you see it every day anyway. All of our guests, this is what they're facing every day in their jobs, and then to see the numbers that can really get you down. So thinking about how do we move forward is just a lovely thing and much needed. So y'all think about those music videos we're going to talk about. We need to do a whole episode too on getting into that kind of work. So connecting this now to this 2026, the current streaming film that you have. Let's start with the positive, because there is, I think, one data point that is a positive for Black women in there. So do we want to, but if there's more than that, let's talk about the positives, and then we'll get into how things need to change. So Dr. Ramón, what is that data point around Black women's representation?
So that's what's makes it difficult, is that I think we try to put a spin on it, but it's really probably not necessarily something that's
it's not. Let's be real. It's crumbs. It's all crumbs.
But there's
and that's
certain,
okay.
There's certain breakouts when we look at gender within race, ethnicity, that you see that like women are doing within that race, ethnic group, they're doing a little bit better than men, but it's such a low number overall that it's it's not necessarily like
call
anything,
it,
but
we celebrating.
We point it out just to show like that the differences within the group.
there was just a very slight advancement in 2025 for Black women in writing, which it wasn't that big of an advantage over Black men, but they, outpaced them just a little bit last year in writing. And so, but, that representation within directing and leading roles is still kind of remain limited. But yeah, Black women still kind of fall a little short when compared to Black men within the industry. But
let's dive into some of the numbers. What are those top line numbers that either one, you and Jade?
So yeah, so for lead actor in 2025, 16.9% of the leads were Black leads. And then within that Black leads, like I said, men outnumber women for the fourth year in a row. And there were 6 female Black leads in 2025. So that's about 6.7% of all leads total. In terms of like overall cast, so ensemble and main cast, Black actors held about 16.5%. And within the Black actors, women make up about 39.3% of that. And so it's below parity with Black men in total roles. And then moving into directors for 2025, Black directors accounted for about 14.3% of all directors. And then the gender split, within Black directors, that means there was 9 Black men directors and 5 Black women directors in 2025 for streaming film. And then within that, if we want to take that further, Black women directors, as a share of all directors, that means they were about 5.1% in total, in that whole total. And so yeah, it's a little grim. And like I said, for writers, all writers, for all Black writers, they accounted for about 8.7%. And then if we look at the gender split, that means there was about 6 Black men and 7 Black women. And so Black women writers, as a share of all writers, that's about 4.7% for that year. And so I think where there's excitement and where there should be excitement and where studios should be paying attention and executives should be paying attention is thinking about the audience engagement, I think, for 2025. And
Yes.
for me, that's exciting to see in terms of genre viewing among Black households, thinking about the top 20 list of Black households and just how there's really a strong alignment with diverse casts and women forward casts. And yeah, I think that's where there's a little bit of excitement, and I think that's where people should be paying attention to. And
Exactly.
they should be thinking about these things, and that these audiences are what are driving the numbers for these top 20.
Really, it goes back to
streaming
the
films.
whole point. That's what you were told by that executive. Look at the
Yeah.
bottom line, and then you start to look at the bottom line, and it's still there's a disconnect.
Yeah, like
Dr.
they
Ramón, do you
don't
wanna-
necessarily care. And so that's what's really, I think, disheartening about the whole thing is that what we've shown. And so when we first came out with the reports in 2014, like I said, though, it was coming out with multiple years, even in that first report, we found that diversity does sell. So at that time it was limited, but those films actually did well. And so then we kept on building in terms of the longitudinal data, and then we kept on adding more and more information about who is in the audience, what is the race ethnicity of the viewers and their household, and then also their age, and then gender, and then we also looked at the who was buying the tickets in the opening weekend for the theatrical films as well. And so now we have a ton of data that really has a lot of demographic information about who is watching these shows. And what we've shown year after year is that households of color are really driving the ratings. And so they're the reason why movies on streaming or television shows on streaming do well, because there are, when you look at the top 20 of any given year, you find that the majority of those films have an over indexing of households of color as their viewers. And, in addition to that, women are also often really the ones that are driving viewership and streaming. And so then when you look at films, it's always, people have talked about this obviously in other places as well, but in our reports we find that people of color, BIPOC, are moviegoers are the ones that are going to the films and really are the ones that are the reason for big box office successes. And so that's, definitely one thing. And so in the recent reports, if anybody's interested in looking at our reports, they're on socialsciences.ucla.edu.
Yes,
that's my plug. Yeah, we do these further breakouts that are with some of the unweighted data of those surveys that they do of moviegoers. And so we're looking at women of color in particular. And you can see that when women of color find something appealing to them, they definitely support it. And then they are the ones that are the reason for a film's success, right? So whether it's in theaters or on streaming, and it's
you're looking
really
at the
interesting
social media conversation
exactly,
too.
and
That's
social
part of the
media
data,
is
right?
definitely part of it. We have the ratings for social media. Unfortunately, we can't get demographic information on social media, which I'm sure there is somebody has that, but we haven't been able to attain that. But what's interesting is that I think that women of color are really the reason for the success of a lot of these films. And in our report for the streaming films, we saw that Latinx, Black, and Asian women within these households of color were the reason that K-pop Demon Hunters had such a the highest rating possible. And so they were the ones that were driving the success of that film. And obviously everyone watched it, so it was a universal hit. But when you look at the data, and do a deep dive, you find that it was women of color. And usually when you look at that, you know that that's the reason the word of mouth happens, right? And that
Right.
people start talking about it.
Take
It breaks
your
through the
girlfriends,
cultural
let's go out
zeitgeist
together and go see this.
right?
And tell
Everyone
about
talks,
it.
yeah,
Yes.
everyone wants to talk about it on, like you said, on social media and with their friends and family. And so any of those huge hits are usually often related to women, but particularly women of color talking about those films.
Hi, this is Jade Abston, and you are watching Sista Brunch.
I love it, and I think that's why starting with that number 4, that important number 4, and these 4 films that have shown us very clearly, these streaming films have shown us very clearly, but kind of that they will make money. All the things that Hollywood told us that it's not going to sell overseas or it's not going to sell. None of that is true. We see that with these 4. Including, and I think to your point too, it's everybody that's going to see these. So I think sometimes there's a question about whether we, Black, brown folk, BIPOC, do support our own. Are we right? But I think that's what you're saying, and I love that response because I think there is this kind of misconception that we're only going to see these other projects as well. No, we are supporting the projects when women of color are in the lead roles. So what is
exactly.
what's going on, you two? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes too, what was interesting is when you look at streaming, and then when you looked at our older reports on and dissected streaming separate from broadcast and cable, it oftentimes goes to the algorithm. So in 2025, streaming then became less diverse when it had been the most diverse in 2024. The plurality of the top films on streaming were majority BIPOC casts. And then in 2025, it totally plummeted that part. And then it was the casts were mostly 21 to 30% BIPOC cast, which means really just like two people of color within a cast of within the top 8 of a cast. And so in that sense, it was almost like, that this like idea of like a formula, like we'll just put in like, two BIPOC in here and then we're covered. Right. And it's like, no. Right. So it's like, that was the films that they made, that studios were making and releasing. And then it's like, there's not, enough to break through. So then like the algorithm probably really goes to like, certain types of films. And then those are the films that people were watching. And so then it's just like another layer of like who who gets like the attention, right? So like how do you find out about the latest film by this like independent filmmaker? How do you even see it on streaming? And so then it's difficult to break through. And so even though we do look at like who's watching what, it's like they don't even like maybe have every possible like film available to them because the algorithm pushes them towards these other films.
Yeah. So we want to make this a series. So please, every time you have a report, let's just book you on Sista Brunch and make sure you come and talk to us about it. I want to we'll wrap up our final question with our signature Sista Brunch question. But before that, for both of you, share, what do you hope happens when someone reads your report? What are you hoping to happen?
I can go first. I think it says a lot about systemic barriers, even though we're dealing with numbers, we're looking at the data, but I think that's what it's pointing towards. And I don't know, I'm hoping somebody wakes up and sees that that's what it is, because it's just like the challenge isn't just visibility, but it's sustainability in an industry that that is continuing to label Black stories or BIPOC stories in general as risky investments, but the data is telling us otherwise. So I'm hoping the right people are starting to read this, and that people wake up and see what's actually happening.
Dr. Ramón?
Yeah, so I always now since we've been doing this for so long, since 2011, I really just hope that people find empowerment through the reports, right? And so that's why it was so key to me, the audience reception part of it, and making sure that we keep on breaking out like what who are the drivers of these ratings or the box office. And I always tell everyone at the end of any panel that I'm on, I say that you are an investor, right? You, like, as the consumer, this is an industry where you are the investor, and so you should get a return on your investment, right? And then for that, I hope that people understand that Hollywood has to respond to them, and it has to respond to their interests and what they find the most appealing, right? And so to me, there is like hopefully that element that people find in it, that they're either empowered as creatives or empowered as executives and as consumers, to really know that Hollywood needs to appeal to them, and that they are very much an important part of the market. So that, I think, is definitely something that I hope that people come away with.
Amazing. And I can tell you personally, I am consistently empowered, both by seeing both of you just being the badasses out in the world that you are, period. But also this report, as hard as it is each time, and it truly is hard to face this, it's also what we need to be able to make the change so that they can't keep saying that they are changing when the numbers just don't bear that out. And so we need this, and we're so grateful. And we will, for everybody, we're going to have links to the report. We'll have some of this data in the show notes. We'll kind of put some social media out also, but please follow this report. And I can say, some financial help wouldn't hurt too. You can imagine, especially right now in these times, given our federal government, that I would imagine it is challenging to be able to do this work. And so if you are in a position to support UCLA and this Hollywood Diversity Report, you should do that as well. Okay, you two, signature Sista Brunch questions. So you are sitting down to a Sista Brunch with your younger self. What are you both eating? What are you both drinking? And what do you tell your younger self?
That's a good question.
And the brunch part is because we're Sista Brunch now. So, so that's just the fun part.
Like maybe
Sure,
lunch.
Yeah,
I'll go first. I think with I grew up with my grandma lived with us, and I was a very picky eater, but I was the baby of the family. So you can imagine having your grandma there. Like, she always made sure I got like my own little, separate plate, which is probably, not the best idea. But so I would probably have to eat like a little, like a rolled up taco of carne asada with myself. So we'd be eating that, and some soda or something maybe. But I think I would tell myself, and that's something that, I say to younger people, is that, like, you are your best advocate, and to really just, share that with myself, that you should always speak up for yourself, and, never kind of, be quiet, right? And always, and always know that you are, the best advocate, and to not let the world, dim your light.
Beautiful.
Okay, so my parents are from the South, but I grew up in DC. So in the summers, my parents would ship us down south, and so I think about the breakfast my grandmother would make us, which is usually like grits, eggs, pancakes or toast or something like that, and
sugar,
we weren't supposed to be
or
having. Oh no, I do salt and pepper.
Good. Okay. All
with
right.
butter, no sugar. For
famous argument.
I know it is a very
anytime
famous
anyone
argument.
Says yes
no sugar for me.
Okay.
No shade to anybody that likes the sugar and the grits, but not me. And then also, we were kids, so we weren't supposed to be drinking coffee. So my grandmother would let us take sips of her coffee. But yeah, I think I would tell my younger self that your journey is your own, and it doesn't have to look like everybody else's, and what's meant for you is meant for you. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much for all you do. It's so important. It's so helpful to those of us that are out here, whether we're in the DEIA space or in the community building space or the creatives. I would say most importantly what you're doing for the creatives, because you are helping to pave the way for them to get to tell their stories. And I'm so grateful to both of you. Thank you for coming on Sista Brunch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So grateful for you.
Thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Sista Brunch podcast. This was an incredible bonus where we got to learn from two of truly the most important researchers in Hollywood who are bringing us the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report, Jade Abston and Dr. Ana-Christina Ramón. Thank you both. What an incredible opportunity to have them on the show. Sista Brunch is brought to you by Trujillo Productions. Our show creators are Cristobal Enciabuari, Anya Adams, and me, Fanchon Cox. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Join us on Patreon. We're at patreon.com/sisterbrunch. Give us a little $5 a month. Anything you can afford is so helpful for us. Follow us on Instagram at Sista Brunch Podcast. And we are on YouTube. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you can join us if you want to see our faces over on YouTube at youtube.com/Trujillo Media. Sista Brunch is recorded on the unceded territory of the Tongva, the Chumash, the Gabrieleño, the Tataviam, and the Serrano, and the Kizh peoples. Thank you, and we will talk to you all very, very soon.